Yeah. I know I'm early, but I'm turning my audio off. Hi, Sue.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
Hello.
Fine, thank you. Oh, you didn't do anything to his beard yet.
I know.
Wait, why do you want to do something to my beard? What's wrong with it?
It's wild and woolly.
It's not so bad. A
What,
little wild, not so
what
well.
did, what does your boss say? That's what's important.
I have yet to meet my boss in real life, so he has said nothing about it.
Okay, I hear you.
You are not a fan of the beards, I take it.
No, I do like beards, but not wild, untamed ones.
It is it's very tame. Look, it's all straight and nice.
No, no, no.
Uh,
Mm-mm. You
uh-uh.
haven't convinced me. I have a question. Do we know yet when Fred is going on vacation?
I thought that was last week.
Well, he did go last week, but he said he's going again.
Oh, well, it could be. I don't know. I haven't heard anything, Rachel.
I think I thought Irene told me August, but I might be wrong.
Well,
So
it is August.
yeah. But I thought it was like the 17th or something. I might be wrong though.
Well, when he comes on, we'll have to ask him.
Yeah.
Everybody's taking their sweet time coming on today. Maybe we didn't get the memo.
I don't know. The three of us are here.
Well, that's all that matters.
Absolutely. I was just about to say.
How's the weather up there? Is it cooled off any?
Yeah, it was 78, I guess, for a high today.
Wow, I don't think we got that warm. It was
We had one day in the 90s that was pretty miserable. The worst problem now is the air quality because of the
Canada.
haze from the Canadian wildfires.
Yep.
Yeah.
How are
So,
you doing with that? Do you have any
which is
trouble?
not good for my allergies.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand. Our allergies are bad here because of it too. Um, yeah. But I think this morning it was 64, 65, and it might have gotten 75 today, which is great because last week it was like in the upper 80s and 80% humidity. It was disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, not nice.
No.
Unnice.
Not nice. Well, where is everybody?
I don't know.
Oh, maybe they weren't coming today.
I thought he said 1 week, but did he say 2 weeks or 1 week?
No, he said 1 week,
I
but
thought so.
that doesn't mean that we heard him correctly.
Right.
Fair point.
It's only 5:26. He usually comes on right on the dot.
That's
It's
true.
true, but John's not here,
No,
and
John's, one of our most faithful attenders.
Yeah.
right, and not even a member.
Well, I used to be. Does that count?
Of course it
Yes.
counts. Of course it
Okay.
counts.
I'm not a member of a congregation here because I gave up my car and I have no way to get anywhere.
Right.
Oh. Yeah.
Is there one nearby that I mean that
Actually, there are two nearby, and my friends, my daughter's college roommates one belongs to each of the one that are nearby,
yeah.
and I'm sure that they would provide transportation if I asked, but I have not asked.
Ah,
Yeah.
are they conservative or reform or
One is conservative, one is reform.
gotcha.
The reform one is quite large. The conservative one is much smaller, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
As they tend to be. Oh, there's Harold.
Oh,
Well, so maybe
look at
maybe we
that.
maybe we did get the memo.
Hello, Harold.
Hey
We
Harold.
can't figure out where Fred is. You're muted. Harold, we can't hear you.
He's he looks flummoxed.
Doesn't actually say he's muted, but we definitely can't hear him. Oh,
There he
yeah.
goes. It's fancy. Nope.
Nope.
Not yet.
You have broke your configuration.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah,
go.
I got
There
it.
you are.
Now we
The
can
computer doesn't transfer really fast sometimes
Nope.
Yeah.
from one
So
to the other.
now that you're here, what's the story for Thursday?
Don't worry about it. They neither was somebody I meant to text.
Thanks.
They're limiting the audience.
Oh.
So they're gonna have a bigger audience later, they said. So Thursday, around 9 o'clock or so, we're supposed to get somebody on site for an assessment.
Right.
And then at 4:30, there's an I guess area overview that they're going to give.
Uh-huh.
So
And that's the one that's limited.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
it's a security assessment at the synagogue.
At the synagogue, okay.
Yeah.
Have there been threats?
No, this is just the Security Community Network, which is an organization, national organization, provides security training and assessments and keeps their eye on the politics and what's going on. And the fella for the region is coming up on Thursday to look at all the synagogues in the northern part of South Carolina.
Okay.
So that's what it is.
Do we know how to reach Fred? Because it's 5:30.
Well,
I do not.
are you going to text him?
I do not have his number. Rachel does, and I don't think her phone is nearby.
Okay.
You can harass him if you'd like, but we can give him a few minutes.
Yeah. See, I thought that we were not going to have class for 2 weeks. But then when I saw him on Saturday morning, he said, no, we are. So I will. Do I have his? I don't have his cell
Yeah,
number.
he did just say 1 week.
Yeah.
Yep.
We were there.
I don't have his cell. I only have his home number.
I don't know if I have
Well,
it.
but if he's going to be on, he'll be at home, so you can use his home
Yeah.
number.
Oh, somebody.
Your onions.
This is not like him at all.
It is not.
Well, I have two numbers, so I don't know which is his.
One is probably
Well, one is probably his, but I don't know.
Okay, 7146, I believe, is his home number.
Okay, I have another one. I got text him. Let me try it.
Okay. Yeah, he gave me his cell number one time. I got Irene's number.
There he is.
Here we go. Sorry, I'm late.
so late, Fred. So late.
Yeah. Okay.
Fred, when are you going on vacation? We're all confused.
Well, I had half my vacation last week.
Yeah, we know that.
Yeah. And we're going again week after next
So you'll
for
be,
another week,
so we'll have class next week, but then not the following week.
but not the following week. Yeah.
You'll remind us next week, yes?
I definitely will. Yes.
Yes, okay.
Oh, here's John.
Here's John. So I wasn't the last one.
Number.
John, you're never late.
Hey,
Well,
John.
I had to put some people into the river to
Into
float.
the river.
Yeah, we live right alongside of a river
Oh.
called Illinois River, and we have some
Mhm.
friends from Texas visiting, and I had to put them in the river so that they would be able to float down to where our cabin is, and
Nice.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Nice.
We used to
Okay.
we used to do that on the New Braunfels in Texas, and
Oh, yeah.
I'll never forget. Um, my dad crawled out to find out where we were, and ended up crawling through an entire patch of poison ivy,
Ooh.
and he
Oh,
was covered in head to toe.
Oh, Chris.
And I thought you were going to say he heard banjo
Uh,
music.
No, that's only around here, Harold.
yeah.
I like the part about the banjos. You know, quite honestly, I've lived in the South now, gosh, for what, 30, 40 years, and I admire Southerners so much, you know, and they're just plain folks that doing their thing in those little hollows in Tennessee, and Chris and Rachel, where you all are.
We're in our little holler. That's right.
Now, Greenville's a big city.
Okay. Yeah, Greenville's a metropolis.
Yeah, it's a
Compared to
metropolis.
where we live, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we won't even talk about Boston.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
No.
Yeah.
seriously,
Oh, well.
no.
Yeah.
Actually, somebody
Okay.
I worked with just moved from LA to Boston. And I said,
Well,
what were you thinking?
I'd rather live in Boston, I think, than LA. No.
I think I'm with Chris.
Boston is a terrific city, but it is a big city and it has lots of traffic.
Well, I can see that.
And roundabouts.
Oh,
yeah.
For
Yeah,
me,
I-
landing in Logan Airport and going to our plant in Wakefield, it was always a white knuckle trip going around those roundabouts.
And,
Well, you know, that's the new thing here in South Carolina.
Oh, it's
Mhm.
They're
Oh,
plague.
really?
You know,
It's a
the
plague
last
on
5 or
humanity
6 years, they're building more and more roundabouts.
everywhere, and people don't know how to
Yeah.
drive them. It's almost funny to watch.
yeah. But they really are safer than traffic light intersections once you get
Agreed.
used to them. You
Agreed.
just have to
No.
get used to them.
Yep.
When I was in Florida, they're doing them in Florida also.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Seems to make
Yeah.
sense, especially for not so busy intersections. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, or even busy
Well,
ones.
right outside of Logan Airport's not a non-busy intersection.
Well, you know, I don't mind them when they're single lane, but there's a couple that are double lane.
Yeah, those are
People
tricky.
just, they
Yeah.
don't know whether to be on the inside or the outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's some on the cut road between Woodruff and 276. It's just, yeah, the double lanes are terrible.
Yeah, they're just not pleasant at all. And you know,
Harold,
I'm gonna.
the worst time I ever had with roundabouts was driving in New Zealand because, of course, they drive on the wrong side of the
Oh,
That would be
So you get to the roundabout and you panic. Which way am I supposed to turn?
that would
Oh man.
yeah, that would be. You need to hold a mirror up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where are we starting, Fred?
Okay. Yeah. Well, last Shabbat we started the last book of the Torah, Deuteronomy. So this week we're starting the second parsha, Deuteronomy, which begins in chapter 3. We start
Deuteronomy chapter
today.
3, huh?
3, yeah. And actually, Deuteronomy is a kind of a separate book by itself. Most scholars think it was written much later than the other 4 books and tacked on to them, later on. And in a way, it's kind of like a highlight film of the Torah. All the boring stuff in the other books has been edited out. There's nothing like the details of building the sanctuary or all the rules for the sacrifices or the list of begots or the leprosy stuff. All that's gone. And what's left really is just a basic core of it's really said as Moses' farewell speech. When Deuteronomy starts, the Israelites have finished the 40 years in the desert. They're camped on the east side of the Jordan across from Jericho, ready to cross over. Moses is at the end of his life now, and the book of Deuteronomy is really his last farewell speech, to the Israelites. And it's really different than the other books because, from the books we've read so far, most of them are just a combination of different stuff all thrown together. one set of verses doesn't necessarily have anything to do with another set of verses. Deuteronomy is different. It's really very focused. And they're just basically three things. One is Moses reviews all the history up to that point, mainly all they've been through in the desert and the exodus from Egypt. The second is a repetition of a lot of the laws in the previous books. And that's where Deuteronomy actually gets its name. It's from the Greek deuteronomos, the second law. A lot of the laws are repeated in Deuteronomy, but usually with extra details added. And then the third one is Moses is really begging the people not to screw this up. They've been given this beautiful land, this land of milk and honey. If they follow God's laws, they're going to prosper and increase there. If they don't, they're going to lose the land. And Moses is begging them, to get this right. Don't screw up. Keep the land. So those are really the three main themes of the book. And most scholars think it may date from late in the 7th century BCE. One of the great reforming kings of Judah was Josiah, and he ruled from 640 to 608. And there's actually a story in the Book of Kings where they're making repairs on the temple, and one of the priests finds this scroll laying in some rubble behind a wall and brings it to Josiah. And because of that, Josiah makes all kind of religious reforms, throughout the country. And a lot of scholars believe that scroll may have been the Book of Deuteronomy. So, um, although it's presented as speeches of Moses, it almost certainly wasn't written by Moses, particularly since it includes a long description of his death, which he probably didn't write. And it's probably written by scribes at the court of Josiah sometime in that late 7th century period. Okay, and so we begin really with chapter 3, and it begins with verses 23 through 29, which is kind of Moses' last request of God to let him go into the promised land. Someone wants to read 23 through 29.
I'll do that. I pleaded with Adonai at the time, saying, "O my Lord, you who let your servant see the first works of your greatness and your mighty hand, you whose powerful deeds no God in heaven or on earth can equal, let me, I pray, cross over and see the good land on the other side of the Jordan, that good hill country and the Lebanon." But Adonai was wrathful with me on your account and would not listen to me. Adonai said to me, "Enough. Never speak to me of this matter again. Go up to the summit of Pisgah and gaze about to the west, the north, the south, and the east. Look at it well, for you shall not go across yonder Jordan. Give Joshua his instructions and imbue him with the strength and courage, for he shall go across at the head of this people, and he shall allot to them the land that you may only see. Meanwhile, we stayed on in the valley near Beth Peor."
So again, this is Moses. Again, God refuses Moses going into the promised land. What's interesting is if you look at verse 26, because what Moses says is that God was angry with me on your account, for your sake. He's indirectly blaming the people. And you remember the incident that actually resulted in all this. It was back in the book of Numbers when the people are asking for water, and God says, "Speak to the rock." And Moses is just having a bad day. He's just kind of had it with the people. Instead of speaking to the rock, he slams his rod against it. He yells at the people. And even though the water comes out, God says, "Because you didn't sanctify me before the people, because of the way you acted, you're not going into the promised land." And in a sense, he's kind of blaming the people. And I think he may be saying, if you weren't whining all the time about water and whatnot, all this wouldn't have happened. So he does get this one dig in. And then going over to chapter 4,
Fred,
yeah.
before we leave on verse 25, please let me go over and see the good land beyond
Mhm.
the Jordan.
Yeah, on the west side of the Jordan.
Yeah. So that good hill country in Lebanon. So he's really, it was
Yeah.
is it suggested here that he wanted to go further and go up into,
No, actually, what it suggests is, and it's kind of, I think, possibly physically impossible. He's supposed to go up to Pisgah, one of the high places
mhm.
in Moab, and look over the entire land. And Lebanon is at least like 300 miles to the
Yes,
northwest
that,
of
and you can't see
where he
300
is.
miles.
Yeah,
Best
yeah.
30
So
miles
I know
maybe.
you got to believe that Moses has his Superman sight, where he can see the entire land of Israel from that one spot in Moab, which clearly he can't.
Yeah.
So then we go over to chapter 4, and here God begins talking about the laws that He's given to Israel. And somebody want to read the first 8 verses, 1 through 8 on chapter
I'll
4.
go ahead. And now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the rules that I am teaching you, and do them, that you may live and go in and take possession of the land that the Lord, the God of your fathers, is giving you. You shall not add to the word that I command you, nor take from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God that I command you. Your eyes have seen what the Lord did at Baal Peor. For the Lord your God destroyed from among you all the men who followed the Baal of Peor, but you who held fast to the Lord your God are all alive today. See, I have taught you statutes and rules as the Lord my God commanded me, and that you should do them in the land that you are entering to take possession of it. Keep them and do them, for that will be your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples, who, when they hear all these statutes, will say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is to us, whenever we call upon him? And what great nation is there that has statutes and rules so righteous as all this law that I set before you today?
Yeah. So there are a couple of important things there, particularly the second verse. You shall not add unto the word which I command you,
Yeah.
neither shall you diminish it. And this became a major controversy later on in the Greco-Roman era, between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The Sadducees were biblical literalists. They believe that you observe the laws exactly as they're written. Nobody has any right to add anything to it. And of course, the rabbis, the Pharisee party, were adding all kind of stuff to it. A lot of the stuff the Jews observe today is not there literally in the Torah. It's stuff that the rabbis tacked on. And the argument the Sadducees made is that that's specifically forbidden. You're not allowed to add anything that's not there. An example would be a few days ago, we marked Tisha B'Av, which is the yearly day of mourning for the destruction of the temple on the ninth day of Av. And this is not in the Torah. There's no mention of having a day of mourning, basically because uh, there's no account of that. Actually, there is. There's a book of Lamentations there, but nowhere does it command you to observe a day of mourning. The rabbis just simply tack that on. So it's an example of they did add a lot of stuff to it, even though they denied it. Their argument was, well, it was kind of there to begin with, but it wasn't explicit. We just kind of brought it out. Or another example would be, we're commanded to light candles every Friday night, as we welcome in the Sabbath. And the blessing that we say over those candles is, blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us by his commandments and commanded us to kindle the Sabbath lights. That's a beautiful blessing. The only problem is nowhere in the Torah does anybody command you to kindle Sabbath lights or any other lights. There's no commandment anywhere in the Bible to light candles anytime. This is purely a rabbinic invention. They added it on. And so, in a sense, the Sadducees were right. The rabbis were going against this rule, but we've accepted it. Subsequent generations went along with it, gave them the right to add these things to the laws of the Torah. And of course, the other thing which you see in these verses, that the other nations will look at Israel and see, what people has been given these wise laws. And in a sense, a lot of people feel that's really Israel's mission, to be what Isaiah calls a light to the nations, that everyone should look, at Israel and see, a people that live like that. That must be a great religion. That must be a great God that they worship. And then he goes on in the next few verses to start recalling the experience at Sinai when the law was first given. And that's in verses 9 through 14. Somebody want to read that?
Sure. Only be you on the watch, and watch yourself closely, lest you forget the things that your own eyes have seen, and lest they swerve from your heart all the days of your life. And you shall make them known to your sons and to your sons' sons, the day that you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb, when the Lord said to me, assemble the people to me, that I may have them hear my words, so that they learn to fear me all the days that they live on the soil, and so that they teach their sons. And you came forward and stood at the bottom of the mountain, and the mountain was burning with fire to the heart of the heavens, darkness, cloud, and dense fog. And the Lord spoke to you from the midst of the fire. The sound of words you did hear, but no image did you see except the sound. And he told you his covenant that he charged you to do, the 10 words, and he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. And me did the Lord charge at that time to teach you statutes and laws for you to do in the land into which you are crossing over, to take hold of it.
And then he basically goes on emphasizing, let's see here, in 15 through 20, he emphasized the fact that the experience at Sinai was totally sonic, that you heard what was going on, but you didn't see anything. And then in 15 and 20, he actually goes ahead and expands that. Somebody want to read those verses, 15 through 20.
Sure. For your own sake, therefore, be most careful, since you saw no shape when the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the fire, not to act wickedly and make for yourselves a sculptured image of my likeness whatever, the form of a man or a woman, the form of any beast on earth, the form of any winged bird that flies in the sky, the form of anything that creeps on the ground, the form of any fish that is in the waters below the earth. And when you look upon the sky and behold the sun and the moon and the stars, the whole heavenly host, you must not be lured into bowing down to them or serving them. These your God allotted to other peoples everywhere under heaven.
So again, this is really the second commandment, kind of a preview of the second commandment. And it's very clear that what God's saying is you should not make any image of anything to worship. But the rabbis actually took it a step further, and they said you can't make any image of anything for any purpose at all. And as a result of that, there was absolutely no Jewish creativity in the arts at all till well up into the 19th century, which to me is a misinterpretation of the second commandment. But one of the justifications that has been given for that is the idea of building a fence around the Torah. If you create a beautiful statue or a beautiful painting, even though it wasn't for the purpose of worshiping it, maybe people will come to worship it. So just to put an extra, extra fence around the second commandment, you can't make any kind of art at all, even if the intention wasn't to make something to worship. The other really interesting thing is in verse 19, where he says you can't worship the host of heaven, which was very common in that, sun worship, moon worship, astrology, worshiping the stars was very, very common. Not in even today, papers have astrology columns. But what he says is that your Lord your God is allotted unto all the peoples under the whole heaven, which seems to be saying it's okay for these other people to worship the sun and moon and stars. That's fine. It's just you don't get into that. So, okay. And then there he again in verse 21, he kind of doesn't leave the subject of not being able to go into the promised land because he says, now the Lord was angered with me, and again for your sake, and swore that I should not go over the Jordan, and that I should not go into that good land which the Lord thy God gives thee for an inheritance. So he really he can't get off that subject, but you really can't blame him. I mean, 40 years with his people in the desert, one bad day, that's it, you're out. You gotta sympathize with him. Um, and then let's skip over to verse 25. There's a lot to cover. This is a very long parsha, so there's a lot of stuff to cover. And 25 to 31 really it starts into the penalties for not following God's law. So if someone wants to read 25 through 31.
Yep, I'll keep going. When ye have begotten children and children's children, and are long established in the land, should you act wickedly and make for yourselves a sculptured image in any likeness, causing your God displeasure and vexation, I call heaven and earth this day to witness against you, that you shall soon perish from the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. You shall not long endure in it, but shall be utterly wiped out. The Lord will scatter you among the peoples, and only a scant few of you shall be left among the nations to which the Lord will drive you. There you will serve gods of wood and stone, made of human hands, that cannot see or hear or eat or smell. But if you search there, you will find your God, if only you seek with all your heart and your soul. When you are in distress because all these things have befallen you, and in the end, return and obey your God. 31.
Yeah.
For your God is a compassionate God, who will not fail you nor let you perish, will not forget the covenant made on oath with your fathers.
Yeah, and this is pretty much the prediction for the rest of Jewish history. I know you're going to screw up and sin, and you're going to lose the land. But again, I'll never abandon you. The covenant is eternal, regardless. You can sin and sin and repent again. But it's, in a way, he's saying, this may turn out to be a bad marriage, but divorce is not an option. There'll always be a saving remnant, and this has been pretty much a story of Jewish history, pretty much since that time. Also, he called heaven and earth to witness against them, and the prophets picked up on that. You see it in Isaiah, Jeremiah, where Isaiah actually starts off this book by saying, "Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for the Lord has spoken." Again, and you see this a number of times in the other prophets, where God is calling his creation as witnesses to the covenant, which Israel has broken. And then, of course, with chapter 5, we get into the Ten Commandments. Of course, this is the second time we've had the Ten Commandments. The initial time was in Exodus, and there are really some differences in there. If you let's see, if you look at the first one, which really is not a commandment, basically, it starts actually. The Ten Commandments actually begins in verse 6 of chapter 5. So he starts off with, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before you." So in a sense, it is a commandment. It's a commandment against idolatry. And And then he starts off, with the second commandment: "You shall not make unto thee a graven image, even any man, and anything that is in the heaven above or the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, and upon the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto the thousandth generation of them that love me and keep my commandments." And again, this was pushed by the rabbis to mean no art at all, because and of course the controversial part of this is, why are the sons and grandsons and great grandsons being punished for the sins, of one of their ancestors? And several of the rabbis have tried to interpret their way out of this, um, by saying, well, if you create an evil society, obviously it will affect the lives of your children and grandchildren and so forth. And so this is how you ought to interpret it. Though in Ezekiel, Ezekiel says very plainly, the son shall not suffer for the sins of the father, or the father for the sins of the sons. So there is some contradiction with this one. And then he goes on in verse 11 to the third commandment: "You shall not take up the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that takes his name in vain." And again, this is not against perjury, because the ninth commandment covers that. But it's basically saying that you never use God's name except in prayer, or maybe occasionally in study. And even in the courts, I mean, in the Talmud, when they go through judicial procedure, if at all possible, don't make anybody swear. Try to resolve the case any other way you can, and swearing oaths is a last resort. You never want to utter God's name in public, unless there's no other alternative to it. Um, and you see it, with the very Orthodox. If you have the Art Scroll version of the Torah, they just say Hashem, the name. They don't even use Adonai, much less pronounce God's actual name. So that they take it even a step further. And then the one that really is different is the fourth commandment, the commandment for Sabbath. And here there's a real difference between the version here in Deuteronomy and the version in Exodus. Well, first of all, it starts off, observe the Sabbath day. They use the Hebrew word shamor, which means keep or guard or observe. If you turn back to look at the Exodus version, and that's in Exodus chapter 20. Chapter 20, verse 8. "And it began, Zachor, remember." So, which is kind of a small difference. But the rabbis picked up on that, and there's actually a mystical interpretation of that somehow God said both words at the same time, Zachor and Shamor, keep and remember, and the people heard it together as one word. And if you go to services on Friday night, the primary Friday night hymn is the Lachot Odi, the Welcome to the Sabbath Bride. And the first verse starts off, Shamor v'zachor dibor echad. Remember and keep, or keep and remember, one utterance. And that was written by one of the mystics at Shafat, who believed that God actually said both words simultaneously, and somehow they were heard simultaneously. But the real difference is, if you read on in there, 6 days shall you labor, do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath unto the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any manner of work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy ox, thy ass, thy cattle, nor the stranger in thy gates, which is about the same thing as the Exodus version. But then with verse 15, then it diverges and says, "Thou shalt remember that thou was a servant in the land of Egypt, and the Lord thy God brought thee out thence by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. And therefore the Lord thy God commands thee to keep the Sabbath day." So here they're giving the Exodus as a rationale for the Sabbath. But if you turn back to Exodus itself, in chapter and verse 11 of chapter 20, For in 6 days the Lord made heaven, earth, the sea, and all that is in it, and rested on the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the seventh day and hallowed it. So you really have two different rationales for the Sabbath day. In Exodus, it's because God created the earth in 6 days and rested on the seventh. In Deuteronomy, it's because the Lord brought you out of Egypt. The one in Exodus seems to make more sense. But what the rabbis decided to do is include both of them, because if you read the text of the Kiddush that we make on Friday nights, over the wine, it gives both explanations. It gives, that it's in remembrance of the creation of the world, but it's also in remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt. So the rabbis just combined both of them, when they wrote the Kiddush. The other thing which is significant about this is the word that they use for work, which is the Hebrew word malacha. And biblical Hebrew has 2 or 3 words for work, but malacha is only used in conjunction with the Sabbath and the holidays. And it means really more than work. It doesn't really mean necessarily physical work. It means anything that's a product of human creativity. So like on the Sabbath, you can't use your cell phone, you can't turn on the TV, you can't drive your car, you can't carry money, you can't write. And none of these things are work in any really meaningful, any usual sense of the word. None of these are really work in the way we usually understand work, but they all involve human creativity, whether it's electronic gadgets or automobiles or money or writing. All these things are products of human creativity. And the idea is on the seventh day, you turn all that off. You remember that God created the world, we didn't. And so all human creativity is just put to the side, for that one day. So theoretically, you could be laying on your couch Saturday afternoon and thinking about what you're going to do when you get back to the office on Monday morning, and that would be malacha, by
Yeah.
rabbinic reasoning. That would really be desecrating the Sabbath. On the other hand, you could move furniture around in your house, and that wouldn't necessarily be breaking the Sabbath. So it's a real.
What if your regular job is a furniture mover?
You've got a Talmudic mind. Yeah, the Talmud would probably spend several pages on that
Fred,
if it
Fred with
came
this
up.
with the backhand compliment there. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, that means you can ride the horse, but you can't be pulled in the wagon
You
behind
can't
it
load the wagon.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
because the
Yes.
wagon's man-made or
Yeah.
made
The
by a
other thing,
human.
which is kind of a point of controversy also, is that it said not only do you rest, but your maidservant, your manservant, your domestic
Yeah.
animal. And of course, in Orthodox communities, there's a tradition called the Shabbos goy, where you pay a non-Jew to do things that you can't do, on the Sabbath, which to me has never made any sense, because in a sense, he's your servant, and he's supposed to rest also on that day. I think even in the Orthodox community, it's kind of a controversial subject whether you can really have what's called a Shabbos goy or not. Whether the Sabbath commandment really permits that kind of thing or not. And then it goes on. The other ones are fairly familiar. Honor your father and mother. You shall not murder. And again, the word that's used here is not the usual word to kill. Again, the biblical Hebrew has several words, for to kill, but this one means specifically murder, which essentially means unauthorized killing. Our society, we're allowed to kill in self-defense. Soldiers are allowed to kill serving in war. Depending on whether you consider abortion killing or not, that can be permitted. And so there are forms of killing that a society may or may not permit. But any unauthorized killing is murder. But other religions actually have taken this commandment and gone further than Judaism does, and literally read it as "Thou shalt not kill." You're not. Gandhi took it that far. You're not allowed to resist evil. You're not allowed to kill even in self-defense. You have to be a pacifist in war. There is a sect of in India called the Jains. They kind of take it to the nth degree, or you may not kill any living thing. You may not even swat a fly, for that matter. Obviously, they're vegetarians. They won't kill animal food, and they really take "Thou shalt not kill," as far as you can take that commandment. But the rabbinic interpretation is that "Thou shalt not murder," and therefore there are forms of for permitted killing which would not be murder. And then of course there's "You shall not commit adultery," "You shall not steal."
But
Um,
hold
yeah.
on a minute there.
yeah,
So we had the monolithic God, which is the theme, but there were
mhm.
still marriages with multiple at this time, I thought,
Marriages with what?
with multiple spouses.
Yeah, but actually monogamy is not commanded in the Torah. I mean, polygamy was accepted then, and there really is no Torah law against it. I mean, gradually it was dropped as Jews got into the modern era, but even today there really is no Torah law, against having as many wives as the secular law will let you have. In fact, even as late as 1948, when the state of Israel came, and all these Jews from the Arab lands, Yemen and Morocco and Iraq and whatnot, came into Israel, a lot of them were bringing more than one wife. They were still practicing polygamy even into the 20th century. Just as the Arab societies they came from, many people were still practicing it. And so the Knesset finally decided what they would do is kind of grandfather it in. Yeah, you could bring the ones, you could keep the ones you brought, but no more after that. Okay. So, but polygamy is fine as far as the Torah is concerned. For instance, you have the law of what they call levirate marriage. If a man dies having no children, his brother is obliged to marry the widow in order to produce children, to keep the guy's inheritance alive. But what if his brother already has a wife? Well, in the Bible, it's no problem. There's no reason why he can't take another wife. So, polygamy is no problem to the Torah.
Try explaining that to your other half.
So that's interesting, because then we get to "You shall not commit adultery." So if you got
Yeah.
6 wives and you go outside the house, and
Yeah. Well, anybody
You
who has
can't be
6
looking
wives
for
is
number 7.
you can't
Yeah.
be looking for number 7. That's
Yeah. Well,
I was
any
looking for
guy
the
who,
right words, Harold.
yeah, but any guy who has 6 wives and still has the energy left for adultery, yeah, that's I mean that's real stamina. Again, the Mormons were practicing it, until secular law, made them stop it. And
Yeah.
essentially, these Mizrahi Jews, the Jews from these Middle Eastern Arab countries, were practicing it until the secular law in Israel, in the state of Israel, made them stop doing it once they got to Israel. So, polygamy was being practiced well up into the 20th century. And then, of course, the 9th commandment, "You shall not commit perjury, you shall not bear false witness." And the 10th commandment, which of course is kind of a strange one, "You shall not covet," which is actually, coveting is not really an act, it's a state of mind. And the rabbis justify this by saying, well, coveting could lead to sin. If you covet your neighbor's wife or you covet your neighbor's home, that could lead you to kill, to steal, to commit adultery, to lie, to break a lot of the other commandments. And so the 10th commandment is really kind of the fence around the other commandments. Although, in a sense, how can you stop yourself from coveting? I mean, you can't really control what you think. So it's kind of a strange commandment. I mean, you shouldn't covet, but how do you prevent yourself from coveting? Yeah.
And the meaning of that word "covet" hasn't changed.
No, you desire it. You'd like to have it yourself.
Yeah.
And so, which is not really a sin in itself if you don't do anything about it. And so, the best explanation that the rabbis could come up with is obviously you're going to covet, but you've got to stop yourself from taking the next step, and trying to actually get the thing
Yeah.
that you covet. On the other hand, you could covet somebody else's intellect. You could cover his artistic ability. You could covet his athletic ability, but those are not things that you can take from him. So you can covet it all you want, but there's nothing you can do to get those things from him. So these are all material things which you could possibly get and commit a lot of sins in the process of getting them. Okay.
Hmm.
And then it goes into in chapter 6. We have the Shema, chapter 6, verse 4 through 9. Somebody wants to read that 6 4
I'll
through 9.
I'll do it. Hear, O Israel, Lord is our God, Lord alone. You shall love your God, Lord, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions for which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you are at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign upon your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
Yeah. And of course, a lot of Jewish practices wrapped up just in those few verses. Was the first one, the Shema, that's part of every service. Every Jew is just to recite that twice a day in the morning and in the evening, whether he's by himself at home or part of it being in synagogue. So this is really one of the foundation stones of the liturgy. And then let's see, I've lost my place here. Oh, there you go. And then the next verse kind of interesting. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul. And the next phrase is usually translated as all thy might, which is really not a literal translation. The actual Hebrew reads "v'chol lebavcha," which is with all your heart, "uv'chol nafshecha," which is with all your soul, but then "uv'chol ma'odecha," and that ma'odecha comes from ma'od, which is actually an adverb, which means much or very. They're actually using an adverb there as if it were a noun. So if you were to translate it absolutely literally, it would be with all your muchness. And the rabbis interpreted this as with all your material possessions. It's often interpreted with all your might, but that's really kind of a little bit off. The siddur we use now, that Lev Shalom, I think says with all that you have, which I think is what they're really getting at, with all your muchness, meaning with all your material goods, with all that you have. And then it goes to, if you look at verse 8, you shall bind them for sign upon your hand, and they shall be for frontlets on your forehead or above your eyes. And of course, this is the commandment which is interpreted as tefillin. And there was actually a big argument about this in the Sanhedrin. A lot of the rabbis felt this was not to be read literally. This is you bind them metaphorically upon your hand and upon your forehead. But the majority wanted to read it literally. And that's how we got tefillin. And tefillin are really these wooden boxes in which a scroll with this verse, are written. And then you shall write them upon the doorpost of your house and upon your gates. And this is where we get the mezuzah, that we put on the doorposts of a home. And again, inside the mezuzah is a scroll with these verses, written on it by a scribe. So a lot of modern Jewish practice is really wrapped up in just those few verses. And then they shift the subject a little bit with chapter 7. As I said, it's a very long parsha. And chapter 7 is how you're going to behave toward the other people once you get into the land. And this is verses 1 through 11 of chapter 7. If someone wants to read that.
Sure. When the Lord your God brings you into the land that you are entering to take possession of it, and clears away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations more numerous and mightier than you. And when the Lord your God gives them over to you and you defeat them, then you must devote them to complete destruction. You shall make no covenant with them and show no mercy to them. You shall not intermarry with them, giving your daughters to their sons or taking their daughters for your sons. For they would turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you, and we would destroy you quickly, and he would destroy you quickly. But thus shall you deal with them. You shall break down their altars and dash in pieces their pillars and chop down their asherim and burn their carved images with fire. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. It is not because you are more in number than any other people that the Lord sets his love on you and chose you, for you were the fewest of all people, but it is because the Lord loves you and is keeping the oath that he swore to your fathers, that the Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God, the faithful God, who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations, and repays to their face those who hate him by destroying them. He will not be slack with one who hates him. He will repay him to his face. You shall therefore be careful to do the commandment and the statutes and the rules that I command you today.
Yeah. Which really, if you read the book of Joshua, that's one commandment that really was carried out. I mean, a lot of the book of Joshua is what we today would call a genocide and ethnic cleansing, which makes a lot of modern Jews kind of uncomfortable. When you read this, you wonder really why this couldn't be interpreted as, why not, settle in the land and live so that these other people will look at you and be drawn toward your God. I mean, if you think about it, God doesn't seem to have very much confidence in his people. He's saying, if you live next door to these people, you're going to start worshiping their gods. Well, maybe they'll start worshiping your God. It's basically the other thing is again that God is not favoring you because you are stronger or larger than the other people, but they never do really give you a reason why God did choose Israel. It just says, we're doing this because God loves you. And but there nowhere in here or anywhere else in the Torah is there any reason given for why God would choose Israel. There's kind of an interesting take on that by Abraham Joshua Heschel, who is probably the greatest Jewish theologian of the 20th century. And he said, when God chooses Abraham, there are two ways to interpret that. Either Abraham was the first guy who thought that maybe worshiping idols is kind of stupid, and there's probably one universal, invisible God. Or maybe it was the other way around. God was looking for some human, who could sense his presence and who would respond to him. And in fact, Hesher wrote a book about it called God in Search of Man, which was probably his most popular book. It was a big bestseller back in the 50s and 60s. And so the idea was that Abraham was chosen because even though God may have tried to appear to other people, no one responded. Abraham was the one who was able to sense the presence of God and respond to it. And therefore his people would be the ones, God chose, to carry the message. But again, it's really very uncomfortable when you read the book of Joshua, and they're massacring one Canaanite population after another, and you really wonder if why can't God have enough confidence in His people to say, okay, settle down, uh, leave these other people alone, don't worship their gods. And apparently, he seems to feel that his own people are so weak that if they dwell next to idol worshippers, they'll start worshiping idols too, which to me doesn't show a whole lot of confidence.
Well,
that's all.
history has shown
Yeah.
that's exactly what his people do. And he created people, and that's maybe a flaw within his own design.
Could be. And actually, you read even with the prophets going into the 8th and 7th and 6th centuries, idol worship was pretty popular among the Israelites. Even much centuries later. So I guess it was an accurate prediction. The Jews would stray and would start taking up the customs of the people around them. But I'm not sure that killing everybody else is really the best solution to the problem.
Well, as Harold's saying, it's when you look at this and you think about what it's saying, it's all about people falling off the wagon. Well, we all know that the whole history up through this time and beyond to today, that's been our weakest failing, is falling into these other areas that are not healthy.
That's
Just to
true.
try to put it in a good context.
Although you could make the argument on the other side that, if you let these other people survive, is worshiping idols worse than mass murder,
Yeah.
which you're doing to avoid,
Well, and that's
which
what,
sin are you going to pick here?
yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's not a dead issue there. There are people today in modern Israel, what you see going on in Gaza, there is a faction in Netanyahu's government who really believe that there ought to be ethnic cleansing, that the Palestinians should be totally expelled from Gaza and the West Bank, to Jordan or Iraq or wherever we're going to put them. And the only way Israel will ever be a united nation is to get rid of the Palestinians totally. And this really is a major political issue to this day, going on right now in Israel. So it's the same issue coming up over and over and over again.
But then in Israel, there's also a large contingent of Arabs that have accepted Israel as
There are,
a nation. I mean,
20% of 20% of Israeli citizens are Arabs.
Yeah.
But it's not a question of accepting Israel as a state. It's accepting Adonai as their God. And the Arabs have not.
Well, it depends. They call him Allah, but there's only one God and different names when you come right down to it.
Well, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
I mean, I have that. I use that concept all the time, describing religions as spokes on a wheel, but there's only the one hub in the middle.
Yeah.
But in these passages itself, pray to no other gods.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, any other questions, comments on what we covered? Okay. Well, the next part of Akev begins with chapter 7, verse 12. So that's where we'll be starting next week.
This was very good, Fred. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Fred.
Deuteronomy's a good book.
Yeah, it really is.
Like I said, all
I
the
give you a
boring
lot
stuff
of
has been
credit
cut out of it.
also.
Okay, see you
Thank
guys
you.
next week.
Have a good week.
Have a good
Bye.
week, everyone.